Hello, welcome to A Tale from Tales of Horror by H.P. Lovecraft. Today's reading, we're going to be doing The Picture in the House. So grab your blankies, snuggle up, and prepare for a tale of horror. The Picture in the House. Searchers after horror haunt strange, far places. For them are the catacombs a tele, tel, 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 of Ptolemaeus and the cavern mausolea of the nightmare countries. They climb to the moonlit towers of ruined Rhine castles and flatter down black cobweb steps beneath the shattered stone of forgotten cities in Asia. The haunted wood and the desolate mountain are their shrines, and they linger around the sinister monoliths on uninhabited islands. But the true epicure of the terrible, to whom a new thrill of unutterable ghastliness is the chief end and justification of existence, esteems most of all the ancient, lonely farmhouses of Blackwood, New England, for there the dark elements of strength, solitude, grotesqueness, and the ignorance combine to form the perfection of the hideous. Most horrible of all sights are the little unpainted wooden houses remote from traveled ways, usually squatted upon some damp, grassy slope or leaning against some gigantic outcropping of rock. 200 years and more they have leaned or squatted there, while the vines have crawled and the trees have swelled and spread. They are almost hidden now in lawless luxuriance of green and guardian shroud of shadow. But the small paned windows still stare shockingly, as if blinking through a lethal stupor which ward off madness by dulling the memory of unutterable things. In such houses have dwelt generations of strange people whose little whose like the world has never seen, seized with a gloomy and fanatical belief which exiled them from their kind. Their ancestors sought the wilderness for freedom. There, the scions of the conquering race indeed flourished free from the restrictions of their fellows, but cowered in appealing slavery to the dismal phantasms of their own minds. Divorced from the enlightenment of civilization, the strength of these Puritans turned into singular channels, and in their isolation, morbid self repression, and struggle for life with relentless nature, there came to them dark, furtive traits from prehistoric depths of their cold northern heritage. By necessity practical, and by philosophy stern, these folk were not beautiful in their sins. Erring, as all mortals must, they were forced by their rigid code to seek concealment above all else, so that they came to use less and less taste in what they concealed. Only the silent, sleepy, staring houses in the Blackwood can tell all that has lain hidden since the early days. And they are not communicative, being loath to shake off the drowsiness which helped them forget. Sometimes one feels that it would be merciful to tear down these houses, for they must often dream. It was to a time battered edifice of this description which I was driven one afternoon in November 1896 by a rain of such chilling copiousness that any shelter was preferable to exposure. Show coffee setup. One of these days, one of these, I'll show you guys one of these days. Don't you worry. I had been traveling for some time amongst the people of the Miskatonic Valley in quest of certain genealogical data, and from the remote, devious, and problematical nature of my course, had deemed it convenient to employ a bicycle despite the lateness of the season. Now I found myself upon an apparently abandoned road which I had chosen as the shortest cut to Arkham. Overtaken by the storm at a point far from any town, and confronted with no refuge save the antique and repellent wooden building which blinked with bleared windows from between two huge leafless elms near the foot of a rocky hill. Distant though it was from the remnant of a road, the house nonetheless impressed me unfavorably the very moment I espied it. Honest, wholesome structures do not stare at travelers so shyly and hauntingly. And in my genealogical researches, I had encountered legends of a century before which biased me against places of this kind. Yet, the force of the elements which such as to overcome my scruples, I did not hesitate to wheel my machine up and weedy rise to the closed door which seemed at once so suggestive and secretive. I had somehow taken it for granted that the house was abandoned, yet as I approached it, I was not so sure, for though the walks were indeed overgrown with weeds, they seemed to retain their nature a little too well to argue complete desertion. Therefore, instead of trying the door, I knocked, feeling as I did so a trepidation I could scarcely explain. As I waited on the rough, mossy rocks, which served as a doorstep, I glanced at the neighboring windows and the panes of the transom above, and noticed that although old, rattling, and almost opaque with dirt, they were not broken. The building still, then must still be inhabited, despite its isolation and general neglect. However, my rapping evoked no response. So after repeating the summons, I tried the rusty latch and found the door unfastened. Inside was a little vestibule with walls from which the plaster was falling. And though the doorway came to a faint but peculiar hateful odor, I entered carrying my bicycle and closed the door behind me. Ahead rose a narrow staircase, flanked by a small door probably leading to the cellar, while to the left and right were closed doors leading to rooms on the ground floor. Leaning my cycle against the wall, I opened the door at the left and crossed into a small, sealed chamber, but dimly lighted by its two dusty windows and furnished in the barest and most primitive possible way. It appeared to be a kind of sitting room, for it had a table and several chairs, and an immense fireplace above, which ticked an antique clock on a mantel. Tick, 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 tick. Books and papers were very few, and in the prevailing gloom I could not readily discern the titles. What interested me was the uniform air of archaism as displayed in every visible detail. Most of the houses in this region I had found rich in relics of the past, but here the antiquity was curiously complete, for in all the room I could not discover a single article of definitely post-revolutionary date. Had the furnishings had been less humble, the place would have been a collector's paradise. As I surveyed this quaint apartment, I felt an increase in that aversion first excited by the bleak exterior of the house. Just what it was that I feared or loathed, I could be by no means define, but something in the whole atmosphere seemed redolent and unhallowed age, of unpleasant crudeness, and of secrets which should be forgotten. I felt disinclined to sit down, and wandered about examining the various articles which I had noticed. The first object of my curiosity was a book of medium size lying upon the table and presenting such an antediluvian antediluvian aspect that I marveled at beholding it outside a museum or library. It was bound in leather with metal fittings and was in an excellent state of preservation, being altogether an unusual sort of volume to encounter in an abode so lowly. When I opened it to the title page, my wonder grew even greater, for it proved to be nothing less rare than Pigafetta's account of the Congo region, written in Latin from the notes of the sailor Lopez and printed at Frankfurt in 1598. I had often heard of this work, with its curious illustrations by the brothers Debray. Hence, for a moment, I forgotten my uneasiness in my desire to turn the pages before me. The engravings were indeed interesting, drawn wholly from imagination and careless descriptions, and represented, oh, I can't say that word, N words with white skins and Caucasians' features, nor would I soon have closed the book, had not an exceedingly trivial circumstance upset my tired nerves and revived my sensation of disquiet. What annoyed me was merely the persistent way in which the volume tended to fall open of itself at page 12, which represented in gruesome detail a butcher's shop of the cannibal Enziquez. I experienced some shame at my susceptibility to so slight a thing, but the drawing nevertheless disturbed me, especially in connection with some adjacent passages descriptive of Anzique's gastronomy. Anzique. Anzique? I have no idea. I had turned to a neighboring shelf and was examining its meager literary contents. An 18th century Bible, a Pilgrim's Progress of like period, illustrated with grotesque woodcuts and printed by the almanac maker Isaiah Thomas. The rotting bulk of Cotton Mather's Magnalia Christi Americana, and a few other books of evidently equal age, when my attention was aroused by the unmistakable sound of walking in the room overhead, at first astonished and startled, considering the lack of response to my recent knocking at the door. I immediately afterwards concluded that the walker had just awakened from a sound sleep, and listened with less surprise at the footsteps sounded on the creaking stairs. The thread was heavy, yet seemed to contain a curious quality of cautiousness. A quality which I disliked the more because the thread was heavy. When I had entered the room, I had shut the door behind me. Now, After a moment of silence during which the walker may have been inspecting my bicycle in the hall, I heard a fumbling at the latch and saw the paneled portal swing open again. In the doorway stood a person of such singular appearance that I should have exclaimed aloud, but for the restraint of good breeding. But for the restraints of good breeding. Old, white bearded, and ragged, my host possessed a countenance and physique which inspired equal wonder and respect. His height could not have been less than 6 feet, and despite a general air of age and poverty, he was stout and powerful in proportion. His face, almost hidden by a long beard which grew high on the cheeks, seemed abnormally ruddy and less wrinkled than one might expect, while over a high forehead fell a shock of white hair little thinned by the years. His blue eyes, though a trifle bloodshot, seemed inexplicably keen and burning. But for his horrible unkemptness, the man would have been as distinguished looking as he was impressive. This unkemptness, however, made him offensive, despite his face and fatigue. Figure. Of what his clothing consisted, I could hardly tell, for it seemed to me no more than a mass of tattered surmounting a pair of high, heavy boots, and his lack of cleanliness surpassed description. The appearance of this man and his instinctive fear he inspired prepared me for something like enmity, so that I almost shuddered through surprise and a sense of uncanny congruity when he motioned me to a chair and he addressed me in a thin, weak voice full of fawning respect and ingratiating hospitality. His speech was less curious, an extreme form of Yankee dialect I had thought long extinct, and I studied it closely as he sat down opposite me for conversation. "Ketched in the rain, be ye?" he greeted. "Glad ye was nigh in the housin', headin' the sense to come right in. I calculate I was asleep, else I heard ye, and ain't as young as I used to be. And I need a powerful sight of naps nowadays. Travelin' fur. I hadn't seen many folks along this road since I toughed the Arkham stage." I replied that I was going to Arkham and apologized for my rude entry into his domicile, whereupon he continued. "Glad to see ye, young sir. New faces is skurns around here, and I hain't got much to cheer me up these days. Guess you're all from Boston, don't ye? I never been there, but I keen tell a town man when I see him. We had one fur district schoolmaster and 8 before, but he quaints certain, and no one fur district. What? And no one never heard on since." Here the old man lapsed into a kind of chuckle, and made no explanation when I questioned him. He seemed to be in an aboundingly good humor, yet to possess those eccentricities which one might guess from his grooming. For some time he rambled on with an almost feverishly genial geniality. Geniality. I'll have to remember that one. I'm going to look that one up later. When it struck me to ask him how he came by so rare a book as Pigafetta's Regnum Congo. The effect of this volume had not left me, and I felt a certain hesitancy in speaking of it. But curiosity overmastered all the vague fears which had steadily accumulated since my first glimpse of the house. To my relief, the question did not seem an awkward one, for the old man answered freely and volubly. Ah, that Afriky book? Captain Ebenezer Holt traded me there in '68. Him as was killed in the war. Something about the name Ebenezer Holt caused me to look up sharply. I had encountered it in my genealogical works, but not in any record since the Revolution. I wondered if my host could help me in the task at which I was laboring. I resolved to ask him about it later on. He continued. Ebenezer was on a Salem merchantman's for years and picked up a sight of queer stuff in every port. He got this in London. I guess he stirred like turbine things at the shop. I was up to your house once on the hill trading houses when I see this book. I relished the pictures, so he gave it up. So he gave it in on a swap. 'Tis a queer book. Here, leave me get all my spectacles. I don't know why I got that accent, all right? But that's what I got, all right, you guys? The old man fumbled among the rags, producing a pair of dirty and amazingly antique glasses with small octagonal lenses and steel bows. Donning these, he reached for the volume on the table and turned the pages lovingly. Ebenezer could read a little this, 'tis Latin, but I can't. I had 2 or 3 schoolmasters read me a bit, and Parson Clark. Him they say got drowned in the pond. Can you make anything out of it? I told him that I could, and translated for his benefit a paragraph near the beginning. If I erred, he was not scholar enough to correct me, for he seemed childishly pleased at my English version. His proximity was becoming rather obnoxious, yet I saw no way to escape without offending him. I was amused at the childish fondness of his ignorant old man for the pictures in a book he could not read, and I wondered how much better he could read the few books in English which adorned the room. This revelation of simplicity removed much of the ill-defined apprehension I had felt, and I smiled as my host rambled on. Queer how a picture can set a body thinking. Take this urn here in near the front. Have you ever seen trees like that? With big leaves a flopping over a dawn? And then men, they can't be N-words. They do beat all kinder like okay. Oh my god. Native Americans. I guess I even if they be Afriky. Some of these are critters like monkeys or half monkeys and half men, but I never heard of nothing like this, son. Here he pointed to a fabulous creature of the artist, which one might describe as a sort of dragon, with the head of an alligator. But now all strewn ye the best on over here nigh the middle. The old man's speech grew a trifle thicker, with his eyes assumed a brighter glow. But his fumbling hands, though seemingly clumsier than before, were entirely adequate to their mission. The book fell open almost of its own accord, and as if from frequent consolation at this place to the repellent 12th plate screening a butcher's shop amongst the Anzique cannibals. My sense of restlessness returned, though I did not exhibit it. The especially bizarre thing was that the artist had made his Africans look like white men. The limbs and quarters hanging about the walls of the shop were ghastly, while the butcher with his axe was hideously incongruous. But my host seemed to relish the view as much as I disliked it. "What do you think of this? Ain't never seen the whereabouts, eh? When I see this, I tell Eb Holt there's something to stir ye up and make your blood tickle. When I read a scripter about slaying like them Midianites were slewn, I kinder think things, but I ain't got no picter of it. Here a bloody kin see all ye is to it. I suppose 'tis sinful, but ain't we all born a livin' in sin? That feller is to it. I suppose that feller be chopping up gives me a tickle every time I look at him. I have to keep looking at him. Sir, wore the butcher cut off his feet? There's his head on to bench, with one arm side of it, and tear the other arms on the ground side of the meat block." As the man mumbled in his shockingly ecstasy, the expression of his hairy, spectacled face became indescribable. But his voice sank rather than mounted. My own sensation can scarcely be recorded. All the terror I dimly felt before rushed upon me, actively and vividly, and I knew that I loathed the ancient and aberrant creature so near me with his infinite intensity. His madness, or at least his partial perversion, seemed beyond dispute. He was almost whispering now, with his huskiness more terrible than a scream, and I trembled as I listened. "As I say, 'tis queer how our picture set ye thinking. Ye know, young sir, I right sot on this un here. Arter I got the book off Eb, I asked her look at a lot. Especial when I heard Parson Clark rant on Sundays in his big wig. Ocht I tried something funny. Here, young sir, don't get skirt. All I done was tur look at the picter afore it kilt the sheep for market. Killing sheep was kinder more fun arter looking at it." The tone of the man now sank very low, sometimes becoming so faint that his words were hardly audible. I listened to the rain and to the rattling of the bearing small-paned windows, and marked a rumbling of approaching thunder quite unusual for the season. Once a terrific flash and peal shook the frail house to its foundations, but the whispering seemed not to notice it. "Killing sheep was kinder more fun. But do ye know, 'twain't quite satisfying. Queer how a craving gets a holt of ye. As you love the Almighty, young man, don't tell nobody, but I sworn to Ger. The picture began to make me hungry for victuals. I couldn't raise nor buy. Here, set still. What's ailing ye? I didn't do nothing, only I wonder how BF I did. They say meat makes blood, and flesh to give ye new life. So I wonder if I wouldn't make a man live longer. A longer it was more the same. But the whisper never continued. The interruption was not produced by my fright, nor by the rapidly increasing storm amidst whose fury I was presently to open my eyes on a smoky solitude of blackened ruins. It was produced by a very simple, though somewhat unusual happening. The open book lay flat between us, with the picture staring repulsively upwards, as the old man whispered the words, "More the same." A tiny, spattering impact was heard, and something shrewd on the yellowing page of the upturned volume. I thought of the rain and of a leaky roof, but rain is not red. On the butcher's shop of the Anzique cannibals, a small red splattering glistened picturesquely, lending vividness to the horror of the engraving. The old man saw it and stopped whispering, even before my expression of horror made it necessary. Saw it and glanced quickly towards the floor of the room he had left an hour before. I followed his glance and beheld just above us, on the loose plaster of the ancient ceiling, a large irregular spot of wet crimson which seemed to spread even as I viewed it. I did not shriek or move, but merely shut my eyes. A moment later came the titanic thunderbolt of thunderbolts, blasting that accursed house and unutterable secrets, and bringing the oblivion which alone saved my mind. And that concludes today's tale of horror, The Picture in the House. I hope you guys liked that tale. That was pretty good. I liked it a lot. The ending is quite epic, wouldn't you say? A moment later came the titanic thunderbolt of thunderbolts, blasting that accursed house of unutterable secrets and bringing the oblivion which alone saved my mind. How crazy is that? It doesn't necessarily tell you if the man lived or died. It's saying that this huge thunderbolt literally struck the house and either, I guess, brought the whole ceiling down, I'm guessing, and either killed him or saved him. He's speaking as if he did survive at the end, though, because the way he writes at the beginning of this tale is almost as if he is basically retelling an event that happened to him. So it's quite interesting. But wow, crazy, am I right? The fact that the thunderbolt basically bringing down the house saved his life. I hope you guys enjoyed that tale. If you did, please make sure you hit the like, subscribe down below for all you watching on YouTube. If you guys are watching on Twitch, make sure you hit that follow right down below and make sure the notification button is on. It lets you know when I go live, when I'm playing games, or when I'm doing any of these tales. I usually post up on my X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it. I post up on there when I'm going to be going live. I do have a schedule down below in the bios of my Twitch. I wouldn't follow that so much. That just tells you when I have available time in my schedule for when I'm going to be going live. It's not a for sure schedule right now, but hey, if you stop in between those hours, I might be live. We'll see. I might get back into doing some gaming. But for next tale, if you guys want to check that out live, we're going to be reading, or I'm going to be reading, The Outsider. So I hope you guys look forward to that. And there should be some boxes that are going to pop up right over here on the YouTube video. They go to the Grimm's Fairy Tales. If you want to check those out, there's fairy tales. We have about 60 plus readings in there. If you want to go check those out, make sure you hit the like, subscribe on those. There's also the Tales playlist, which should be popping up on this side. Go check those out. We are barely starting up on this playlist, but little by little, we're going to be growing the playlist. So make sure you go check those out. There's other stories that we've read so far that you might like. I highly recommend the Dagon for all you newbies out there. The Dagon was such a good one. I love that tale a lot, but go check it out. I hope you guys enjoy it. And as always, don't stay a stranger. See you on the next reading. Bye.